exchange. Oops, so I'll start again. Hello and welcome to the Women's Finance Exchange. I'm very happy to have you all on our today's, participating in our today's launch of the Women's Finance Exchange, which is followed by a discussion on banking the female economy. And since we have a very tight schedule, let's just get started. My name is Sabine Spohn. I'm part of the Private Sector Financial Institutions Division. And before I introduce our first speaker, just some quick housekeeping rules, please. Most importantly, kindly keep your microphones on mute while not talking, but please also turn the video on when you speak. We have a full packed agenda today and some important guests to join us, such as Ashok Lavasa, ADB's Vice President, Private Sector Operations and Public-Private Partnership, and Suzanne Gaburi, Director General, Private Sector Operations, who will both provide opening remarks. Christine Engstrom, our Director, Private Sector Financial Institutions Division, will officially launch the WFX, or the Women's Finance Exchange. And this is followed by an interesting panel discussion with 3 key speakers on banking the female economy, which is moderated by Samantha Hung, ADB's Chief of Gender Equality Thematic Group. After the panel, all of you will have the opportunity for Q&A, which you can either use the chat box for to post your questions or raise your hands. There will also be a recording of the webinar and shared later in the coming days. And so with this, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome Vice President Lavasa, who has supported actually women borrowers in rural India for many years before microfinance became a household term, to provide his opening remarks. VP Lavasa, please.
Thank you, Sabine. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Let me welcome you all and thank you for joining us in the launching of ADB's unique initiative, the Women's Finance Exchange, and in participating in our webinar called Banking the Female Economy. A warm welcome also to our dynamic panel of speakers from private sector companies and financial institutions who will discuss their experiences in providing digital solutions for women and women's businesses across the globe. I'm looking forward to hearing their insights on how they are successfully targeting the women-driven economy. Today is an important day in our efforts to broaden access to finance for women and women's businesses. Our colleagues in the Women's Finance Exchange are creating digital pathways and meaningful partnerships to help eliminate barriers to finance for women. Allow me to expand on the issues that the Women's Finance Exchange is addressing and how this initiative is positioned in ADB's Strategy 2030. Many financial institutions in ADB's developing member countries have not targeted women borrowers as yet. They have not yet realized the untapped commercial potential of banking with women and could also be unaware of the barriers that women encounter when trying to access financial services. Despite progress, there is still an enormous financing gap, estimated at $1.7 trillion globally for women and women-owned SMEs. In a 2020 report, UN Women surveys indicated that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating gender inequalities and deepening gender-based discrimination and vulnerability. McKinsey Global Institute in July 2020 stated that the pandemic and its economic fallout are having a regressive effect on gender equality. By its calculations, women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable to this crisis than men's jobs. Women make up 39% of global employment, but account for 54% of overall job losses. In these circumstances, the business as usual scenario could prove to be an opportunity lost. And so, unless we act now and act with laser focus, we'll fall back further from both gender and economic gains. The pandemic has also underscored the digital economy, which is expected to give the world a $3.7 trillion or 6% GDP boost. However, small businesses are being left behind. According to ADB's Asia Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Monitor 2020, the majority of MSMEs surveyed in the Asian region suspended operations 1 month after the outbreak and lockdowns. Many of these smaller SMEs are run by women who have no means to otherwise earn an income and have no capital to sustain a business closure for an extended period, much less digitize their business models. So, as technology improves communication and information sharing, we need to focus on bridging the digital divide, especially for women. This should be a tool for empowerment, an enabler in the ease of doing business and in the speed of decision making. The good news is that greater attention is being paid inside and outside the banking industry. Numerous research studies are digging deeper into this topic, indicating that the female economy can be a profitable business segment. For example, a 2019 survey of IFC financial institution clients showed that the average non-performing loan ratio, or NPL, for women-owned SMEs was 3.7%, significantly lower than the average NPL for total SMEs portfolio of 5%. Recalling from my days of microfinance in rural India about 4 decades ago, even then, loans advanced to women were far more regular in repayment than men and exhibited greater credit discipline. Under ADB Strategy 2030, ADB has committed to accelerate progress in gender equality in Asia and the Pacific, as what is good for gender equality is good for the economy and society as well. If you empower women to take control over resources, you're giving her the tools for lifelong change. Certainly, there is a long way to go before we reach gender equality. The seeding and development of women-owned and women-led businesses will need the combined efforts of financial institutions, organizations, and other stakeholders in the public and private sectors for a more vibrant and inclusive Asia-Pacific economy. Hence, initiatives such as the Women's Finance Exchange can accelerate the momentum in some countries and help start it in others. Let me again welcome you to this event and thank the entire ADB team and our valued partners for your collective gender actions and launching the Women's Finance Exchange today. Going forward, this webinar on banking the female economy could well be a significant step to banking on the female economy. I would now like to invite ADB's Director General for Private Sector Operations Department, Suzanne Gaburi, a dynamic woman leader herself, to share her opening remarks. Thank you. I thank you for your patience. And over to Suzanne.
Sorry, can please everyone put who is not speaking their mic on mute?
All right. Thank you, VP Lavazza. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world, and greetings from Montreal. I'm really delighted to be here to welcome our colleagues, our partners, speakers, guests, and friends to this milestone event. It's always an uplifting and empowering experience to join a discussion by women and for women. And today, it will be great to listen to the leaders of M-Pesa, Kalidofin, and Tyme, three trailblazing, I'll get that right, companies and financial institutions. And with this webinar, the Banking the Female Economy, we hope to join and expand global discussions on gender responsive financing. So please allow me to share with you some initial thoughts of our progress in meeting these needs. Within ADB, we're working to hardwire gender mainstreaming in our projects. So for example, we require gender analysis before designing a project. Projects promote women's economic empowerment, create and support opportunities for women, and help women gain greater access to assets and resources. We proactively adjust our approaches and initiatives, such as the Women's Finance Exchange, and we are inspired by the stories of women who rise above the circumstances through access to finance. ADB has been pursuing gender-responsive financing and gender lens investing across sovereign and private sector operations for a number of years. And this is an important focus. For the private sector operations, which I lead. We have a dedicated gender team within the private sector operations department that works across investments to enhance the gender lens approach in our operations and to deliver on ADB's strategic target of proactively integrating gender elements in at least 75% of ADB's operations. We also have standard gender lens investing measures, such as setting targets within credit lines to financial institutions for on-lending to individual women borrowers and or women entrepreneurs. Since 2017, ADB has supported 34 such transactions with financial institutions with a volume of $1.9 billion. And of all of these transactions have a gender focus. In addition, and as of the end of last year, ADB supported 7 million borrowers through our microfinance risk participation and guarantee program, 98% of whom are women and from rural areas. Lastly, through technical assistances, we have assisted our clients in developing products for women borrowers, expanding financial literacy training, and creating and enhancing digital finance solutions that will better serve women borrowers. ADB is not able to do this all alone. So we have partnered, for example, with the Women's Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, or WeFi, to support women businesses in Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and countries in the Pacific. ADB is implementing WeFi programs in these countries, which includes knowledge sharing, blended finance transactions, capacity building, and innovative digital solutions that will enable women-owned small and medium enterprises increased access to finance. So in closing, women need opportunities to build strong and competitive businesses and to strengthen their livelihoods and life skills. A better understanding of what financing options are open to women, the collateral and documentary requirements involved, and the costs and risks associated with various options needs to be further developed. Through fintech solutions, some of the barriers for women can be addressed. Working with financial institutions to develop this opportunity is of critical importance to us, and we look forward to this challenge. Without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to Christine Engstrom, our Director of Private Sector Financial Institutions, to launch the Women's Finance Exchange. And I hope you enjoy this afternoon's discussion with our wonderful speakers. Thank you. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and warm welcome to everyone here, and a warm welcome to our great panelists whom we'll hear from shortly. So the Women's Finance Exchange has been in the making for the past year, and we are really pleased to be officially launching it today. As our Vice President Lavasa and our Director General Suzanne noted, ADB's Private Sector Financial Institutions Group has been working for a number of years with various banks and non-bank partners throughout the region to reduce the gender financing gap. However, we recognize the critical importance of engaging not only these financial institutions that are already our partners, but also a much broader community to bring innovative products and solutions to our financial institutions clients to help them support their female borrowers. The COVID-19 pandemic has only reinforced this need and further highlighted the importance for financial institutions to adapt their business processes and service delivery models through digitalization to better reach these underserved segments. It is ADB's strategic mandate to enable women and their businesses to move sustainably into this new operating environment. So what is the Women's Finance Exchange, and what will we do to address access to finance challenges? We're just getting started, but what we're doing is providing an online portal that creates a community where knowledge can be shared. Then we're going to be offering digital tools and resources, and then building capacities by supporting financial institutions in identifying digital solutions for the female business segment. We'll work with our existing and then new partners to increase the funding windows for financial institutions and ultimately their female clients. Our partners will, of course, include our financial institutions, but also sponsors for technical assistance grants, and then importantly, co-financing partners. As Suzanne had mentioned, one of our first partners whom we are so proud to work with is the Women's Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, or WeFi, whom we've already joined forces with through WFX and their female clients in the Pacific region. Initial activities are already underway in Papua New Guinea. I'm also pleased to share that today we launched our first hackathon. We've worked closely with ADB's IT department on using their technology to crowdsource platform for using digitalization to support financing of women-owned businesses in the Pacific Islands. Through this hackathon, we aim to find solutions supporting women's businesses to close the data gaps that prevent them, amongst others, to access finance. Now, I would like to officially launch the WFX. And I think we have some graphics to do so. Okay, thank you so much. That was our attempt at a celebration event virtually. So we're obviously off to the start of our WFX with a bang. So over to Samantha Hung, ADB's Chief of Gender Equality Thematic Group, who will introduce our fantastic panel of speakers today and then moderate this discussion. Over to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you also to VP Lavasa and DG Suzanne for your inspiring words to get this event off to a great start. It's a great pleasure for me to be the moderator of this exciting panel. And as Christine mentioned, my name is Samantha Hung, and I'm the Chief of the Gender Equality Thematic Group here at ADB. Today's launch of the WFX, Women's Finance Exchange, is an important milestone in ADB's ongoing commitment to support women's businesses in the Asia Pacific, and is particularly timely given the COVID-19 pandemic's devastating impact on women's businesses. Supporting women's economic empowerment is one of 5 key pillars in ADB's Strategy 2030 plan for Operational Priority 2 on accelerating gender equality. And over the years, ADB has been scaling up investments in women's entrepreneurship through a comprehensive approach that tackles the multiple challenges that women face in accessing financial products and services. This ranges from setting ambitious targets for their access to MSME financing, offering tailored financial and business skills training to women, and providing technical support to financial institutions to develop gender responsive services and products. But now to the most exciting part. It is now my pleasure to introduce our 3 panelists. So firstly, we have Rachel Freeman, and Rachel is the Executive Director and Chief Growth Officer of Tyme. And for those who aren't familiar, Tyme is a digital banking group that deploys technology, product, and operational expertise to create digital banks. Their first major deployment is Tyme Bank in South Africa, and launched in February 2019. It's a fully licensed commercial bank with 2.5 million customers and serving more women than men. Secondly, we have Sucharita Mukherjee, who I believe is calling in from Chennai, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Kaleidofin. Kaleidofin is currently serving 1 million unbanked women, and the company has a deep understanding of customer life goals and challenges, and has designed a product bundle to meet their needs. And this bundle is presented in a simple manner on an app with integrated voice and video and available in 9 local languages. And our third panelist is Laura Crow, who is calling in from London, I believe, and she's a principal product manager at Vodafone Group M-Pesa. And M-Pesa is Africa's most successful mobile money service and the region's largest fintech platform. And it currently provides over 42 million people with a safe, secure, and affordable way to send and receive money, top up airtime, make bill payments, receive salaries, etc., and much more. And it's a recent mobile platform that specifically addresses the needs of farmers with a focus also on women. So let's get straight into the meat of this discussion. And I think we have a few slides that our speakers will use. But firstly, Rachel, perhaps you could tell us a bit about Tyme Bank, how it has been able to service in such a short time more women than men, and profitably, we hope, and what were the key lessons and incentives to target this market? Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you to ADB and the Women's Finance Exchange and to WeFi. It's really great to be speaking about this, and we're really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with Tyme Bank in South Africa. So Tyme is a global digital banking group. We design, build, and commercialize digital banks. Tyme Bank is our first deployment in South Africa. We can go to the next slide. And we have actually 3.5 million customers now. So we're growing at about 120,000 customers a month. Even with COVID, even with different challenges that South Africa has faced, we are rapidly growing because we're meeting the needs of our customers, in particular women. And we track this very closely through Net Promoter Scores. And our Net Promoter Score overall is 63%, which is the highest in South Africa for a bank. But with low-income women, we're about 69, which is actually higher than Netflix. So we feel like we're really making a big difference there. So how have we been able to serve and recruit low-income people, youth, women, people in rural areas? It's because we tackle three major barriers. The first is physical access, that it's often challenging to get to a branch, get to a financial institution, and actually start to bank with them. So we have made it easy to actually open a bank account by launching our digital kiosk in grocery stores across South Africa. We have about 850 of our kiosks in Pick and Pay and Boxer grocery stores. You walk in, you can open a bank account in under 3 minutes, and you get a personalized debit card and can do cash in, cash out at the cash register. This means that on day one, we had a broader presence than any bank in the country, and we were able to go where people go, in particular women. The second is financial access. It can be expensive to bank in many countries. In particular, that was the case in South Africa, where you had to pay to open a bank account. And we have changed substantially the financial model for banking in the country, and we've made it much cheaper than any other financial institution. So again, we're able to serve that market and really help them become banked. And the third is emotional access, where it can be just really challenging to go into a bank and start banking. And we solve this by actually putting ambassadors in. So when you hear a digital bank, you automatically think app, and this is app banking. And in reality, what we have is a fully digital model on the back end. We hate paper. We don't have any paper, but we actually really like people. And we say that digital banking can be about people. So we have the kiosk where you can self-service, open your bank account. And then we have ambassadors in all the grocery stores that spend about 20 or 30 minutes with each customer that wants to talk with them, that shows them how to download the app, how to use it, how to do anything you might want to do with that with the app and with the actual bank account. 70% of our ambassadors are women. So it means that women feel very comfortable using our product from day one. And this is why we've been able to grow, to have so many women served, and our percentage of women is growing every day. So with this, what we're showing is actually the process in the store and the kiosk and how it works, where you go into the store, open the bank account, and what we've been able to do is access cash in, cash out very easily at the till point, just as if you're getting groceries. You can use the till and the register as a teller. And again, it makes it really easy to use our products. And this is why we think that Tyme has actually done so well in South Africa. And we're looking forward to moving and introducing their next bank in Asia.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That was really interesting. I like that you said digital banking is about people and the use of terms of ambassadors. And did you say emotional access, if I caught that correctly? And that was a really interesting term. We have a lot of people on the call at the moment, so I'd really encourage people, if you have questions, to put them in the chat box, because we will be taking them later. But for now, I'll go around to each of the speakers for the first round, and moving on now to Sucharita. My understanding is that you offer specific products for women clients, and it would be interesting to know whether you did this right from the start, and if not, what made you change your mind and what was the value proposition? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samantha. At Kaleidofin, we actually started with an audacious mission to say, how can we ensure that 2 billion informal sector customers out there in largely in emerging markets can actually make their real life goals happen. How can we get our customers to send their kids to college, to build that additional bathroom, to improve their homes? And how can we use tailored financial solutions? You can move to the next slide to do this, to really make your life worth it. Now, what is the big problem? Today, the big issue is that there are more than 600 million people in India and about 2 billion in the world who really don't have access to suitable financial solutions at all. This is a big gap, and the financial services landscape is really dominated by product manufacturers. So imagine if you were going to buy a car, but you were actually sold brakes and wheels and engines instead. And all you really want to do is send your daughter to college, and you need a financial plan to get you there. Well, that's what Kaleidofin offers. You can go to the next slide. What Kaleidofin offers is not financial products, but financial solutions. We are a neobank. We have a full suite of financial services. What we mean by a financial solution is that these are combinations of savings, credit, insurance, pensions in just the right amount so that you can reach your goals. Just like Rachel said, I completely agree that reaching out to women and reaching out to informal sector customers in particular really requires, how she very nicely put it, emotional access, tech with touch. We also believe in very much the same approach, and in some sense we have combined our product suite of saving-based financial solutions, which is called Kaleido Goals, digital payments, which is inclusive payment solutions, which even work for customers with feature phones who are otherwise traditionally completely excluded, and Score, which is an automated credit health check that customers as well as institutions can use to get tailored loans. Through this universal approach, we have now about 900,000 active customers. In India, we are present in 14 states and 400 districts. And in some sense, overall, just to come back to the core question of how do we access women customers, one of the reasons why we chose to focus on women customers shortly after we started operating was that women were far more motivated about household goals than men were, far more committed, far more disciplined. And we saw women as the gateway to the family and being the custodian of the household goals. There were 2-3 things that we provided. One was doorstep service. We have 3,000 plus agents. This number is increasing every day, who can actually reach out to the customer and help the customer through the onboarding experience, through the financial health assessment experience. The app actually helps to do real-time financial health assessment, but you still need some assistance out there, especially with KYC as well as payment setup. Second, we also found that women greatly value confidentiality in financial services transactions. And therefore, sometimes we found that even though there was a smartphone in the house, they were reluctant to use, let's say, their husband's smartphone because they wanted to make sure that their savings were confidential and known only to them. And therefore, they would rather use a friend's smartphone who they trust rather than their husband's. And we had to make sure that we could support that level of confidentiality and, never lead to that breach of trust, because we knew it meant a great deal to the customer. Thirdly, most of our women customers work near their home, and therefore doorstep service and assistance is a must. So these are really some of the strategies we used. to design our financial solutions for women, and really excited about expanding further in India and in other emerging markets as well.
Thanks very much, Sucharita. Again, very interesting. I mean, your focus on solutions as opposed to just services. And I like what you were explaining about, the different values and importance of tailoring the support at the doorstep along with the technology and the value of confidentiality. Some really interesting perspectives in there. So thank you for sharing that. So moving on now to Laura. So Laura, M-Pesa was one of the first movers to provide mobile money services to the unbanked, and Digifarm is your latest mobile platform that addresses the needs of rural farmers in Kenya. Does it have specific services for women farmers in Kenya? I'd like to hear a bit more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to ADB and the Women's Finance Exchange for having us this morning for myself, and I guess a lot later for others. So yeah, thank you. So in terms of the question, kind of the short answer is partly in terms of services for women, and I'll get to that in a bit more detail in a moment. But just to set the scene a bit more than as you mentioned previously, so if we go to the first slide on M-Pesa, we're currently a mobile money service available in 7 markets, and as I said, we serve over 48 million customers across those 7 markets. And like as the other speakers mentioned, we're kind of a digital platform, but also with touch. So we have over 918,000 agents that are a really important bridge for us across our markets in order to be able to register for the service and provide that bridge from cash into e-money that goes through our system. So in terms of the markets we're available in, we've got 5 of these listed here, and then also we're in Kenya, which is obviously the home of M-Pesa, and also Egypt. I list these 5 because this is where we do have been tracking some of our gender data, and as you can see, whilst M-Pesa's had an important impact in terms of financial inclusion, overall a gender gap certainly still persists, and something that we need to be working to really address across the business and continue to be trying to do that. In Kenya, our most mature market, you'll see by some of the data you can see from the GSMA that gap has reduced quite a lot in that mature market, particularly in terms of access from the account level for mobile money. But we know when it comes to some of the more complex financial services layered on top of the service, such as kind of access to credit, etc., that gap does widen versus just owning of the mobile money account. So I am here today mainly to also talk about Digifarm, which is one of the services that we have brought on top of M-Pesa. And M-Pesa and Digifarm was actually an inception of the concept by Michael Joseph, who was the CEO of Safaricom in terms of the birth of M-Pesa and leading that to launch out to so many other markets. And kind of the concept of that is that the M-Pesa has kind of managed to hit kind of the rural areas, but there is so much more opportunities that can be done over the payments infrastructure to try and bring more impact to these customers. So going back to the question in terms of partly, is it designed for women servers? We're actually able to partner with Mercy Corps and AgriFin, which is a program in many markets in Africa, to work with them in terms of designing the solution. And we really wanted to bring a service that actually worked for farmers end to end. So it was about kind of looking at all the challenges that farmers were facing and trying to then look for local kind of tech partners that we could bring to that platform to provide solutions right across the spectrum of those issues, to bring kind of technical solutions. And so in doing so, we did work with Agrifin and their partners in turn, Dalberg, which are very focused and experienced in terms of human-centered design work. And so we were looking at working with farmers and getting insights both from male farmers and women farmers, because obviously women present a significant portion of smallholder farmers in Africa and beyond. So we definitely got a number of different insights, but it wasn't exclusively designed for women. It was trying to bring insights across kind of both genders. And as we launched the service, we also were able as I think the host has muted me, but I'll hopefully you can now carry on. So we received some funding to do some specific kind of gender impact analysis on the service that we were able to bring. And so this finding actually found that 48% of our users were women. So it was definitely cutting through from a gender aspect, although not specifically designed for them. But we were able to then kind of dig down, and there was some more useful insights from this. So if I go on to kind of the next slide, which gives a bit more detail in terms of the gender components. So the service itself has been able to attract over 1.5 million active customers, but that was kind of largely driven through the information component that we brought together in terms of the overall end-to-end service for farmers. So access to information was one of the key components. One of the other key components we really wanted to drive was this access to finance for financing good quality inputs for hoping to improve yields with farmers. And here we've seen obviously a lot lower in terms of cut through in terms of applications. And we actually can see here that we've had over 5,000 women smallholder farmers go through the whole financing system, but men's applications consistently outpaced women's by that of over 8 times. And then when we actually looked to see repayment behavior between women and men, there wasn't actually any particularly significant differences, unlike that some others have experienced. The repayment rates were pretty similar, but we did see from women that there were sometimes delayed repayments, but they did eventually repay. So I guess the part of this study also kind of went on to do more focus groups to understand how we could try and scale up this product even further. And what was a really interesting insight, as some of these focus groups have been doing, is a slight divergence between women and men in terms of what they valued from the service. So women really liked the fact that Digifarm was concepted as a real end-to-end service. So they got a lot of confidence from being able to start with the access to information and then being able to move on to start in terms of being able to apply for loans for the inputs. And then also as the platform also supports in terms of them being able to sell their produce into an established market with buyers. So they really welcomed that overarching approach to take them throughout the whole cycle. Whereas many of the male participants actually saw more of a modular aspect to the service where they didn't need to interact kind of end to end and be able to potentially just pick up some components of the Digifarm service. So we're actually at a very interesting gateway at the moment in terms of design, given that there's kind of potentially a couple of different tracks for Digifarm to understand maybe we have 2 products simultaneously, which are kind of aimed slightly at different target audiences, but are able to kind of meet the unique needs. So this is kind of an evolving process that we'll have to kind of come back at some point and share back with the Women's Finance Exchange to see how that approach goes. But we're definitely seeing kind of unique needs, even though we hadn't kind of formally started out kind of exclusively in terms of women, in terms of the design. So I'll pause that and then hand back to Samantha in terms of chairing kind of the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura. Another very interesting example. And I can see a very active chat box here, which is great. And thank you to the panelists that are answering some of them as we go. We have other questions coming in, and perhaps just one that I would like you, Rachel, to answer, because maybe not everyone has caught it in the chat box, is there seems to be a lot of interest in your emotional access idea. And if you could maybe talk briefly to the question that's come up in the box about how does Tyme actually balance between tech and touch for customers?
Yeah, so, what we believe is that people that are underserved or unbanked, it's also scary and challenging to start to become banked and to take that first step. So we believe very strongly that people only can walk from where they stand. And so what we try to do is meet them where they are. So that's what the whole idea with these grocery stores is. And then the ambassador helps them walk the journey. So they come in and explains, what is the kiosk? How does it work? What are the different products and services with a bank? And then helps them through that process, helps them on board, helps them show them how do you send money? How do you put in money in? How do you take money out? How do you use the card? And all of that training is on the spot. And this came from the idea that most people, when they open a bank account, go to a branch and there's lots of forms that happen, but there's not that much education in most branches. There's no one who says, this is actually how it works. So we try to achieve kind of that comfort level and overcome this emotional kind of barrier by doing a lot of that education on the spot, making it very hands-on. Our ambassadors are in the same store all the time. They can only be one taxi stop away from that store. So they're really part of the community. It means almost like having your own personal private banker that you can go talk to whenever you want in the store. And that's, I think, the most important thing that we've done, more than the financial access or the physical access, is working on this emotional access. And so often when we talk to other partners, they say, but you're a digital bank. Why do you have ambassadors? Why do you think a card is important? Why do you use the kiosk? But we really believe that you have to go to where people are and walk that journey. And that if you want to bank for women, if you want to bank for the low income, for youth, for rural, you have to actually embrace a model that is way beyond just the digitally savvy. People have lots of smartphones in many countries, but it doesn't mean just because you can go and use Instagram, you actually want to bank. And that's where we kind of walk that journey with all of our customers.
Thank you, Rachel. So it's almost like emotional, but also psychological access, isn't it? It's like really getting to what is the human reason behind not being able to access.
That's why we say it's high tech. Everything about our kiosk and how it works is very high tech. Everything about the actual channel, the bank is, we have almost no paper, very little people. It's really all digital. But we say digital bank should be digital on the back end and be about people in the front end. And that is fundamentally different from most of the other digital banks, particularly those in Europe, UK, and the US.
Right. So I guess a similar or maybe related question for you, Sucharita, is you talked about your really impressive growth, rapid growth, and now you're reaching, I think, around close to 1 million unbanked. So was there an actual formal strategy to get to that number, or how did you reach that, and how was that approached? Be interesting to hear a bit more about that nuance. Thank you.
Yes. So we started with a savings first strategy in the first couple of years, because we really wanted to understand the customer, and we felt that savings is really one of those few universal products which really everyone needs. 100% of customers need. This really enabled us to build very solid financial health assessment tools and algorithms, and in some sense, our ambition was always to be a full service neobank. So we were at, let's say, about 50,000 customers 18 months ago, just about 18 months ago. And we, from the financial health assessment algorithms, we also developed a credit health underwriting tool, given that an individual surplus can be used for savings, for credit, or for both at the same time. They're really one and the same concept. When the pandemic hit, India, we felt that there was an urgent need of our customers to access emergency liquidity lines, as well as digital payments. We found that customers en masse were not able to pay even if they had the resources. And a lot of them didn't have the resources because there was, of course, a loss of jobs. But even if they did, there was just no way. So we focused on those two aspects, credit, specifically emergency credit lines, as well as digital payments. And post-pandemic really worked on a war footing to roll out these products in 40 days. They were, of course, at the back end, almost 2 years in the making. And we saw enormous uptake. So almost 750,000 credit customers, but 100,000 customers on the digital payment side, all in the last 18 months. And we really saw our product proposition becoming far more complete. So we found that customers actually save and borrow at the same time, and therefore that overall post-pandemic strategy really drove a very, very significant part of our growth.
Thank you. That's really interesting that, that it was really in the pandemic times, and the fact that you have been able to grow so rapidly is really a reflection of your ability to respond to the niche demand. And that's really, really interesting to hear. So moving on to Laura, I mean, a lot of what all three of you are doing in terms of your organizations is breaking new ground. And I'm sure that there are challenges as well that come with the positive aspects. So perhaps, Laura, you could help share the challenges of being a first mover in the fintech industry in Kenya, and what were some of the hard parts?
Yes, I mean, I guess if I talk to more from a kind of a gender perspective, I guess one of the big challenges we had or continue to have is actually kind of the granular data that supports kind of evolving some of these agendas. So in order to try and make the product and the onboarding as simple as possible, we actually ask for very minimal information up front in terms of the know your customer data. So we don't have good kind of gender information that we're collecting, on our basic feature phones to have a really clear insight in terms of our gender representation across the customer base. So we have to work much more in terms of kind of survey samples, etc., to get a better idea in terms of the usage between customers. I think another kind of challenge, particularly again from a gender aspect, is as we kind of talked about some of the touch points, and kind of Rachel kind of touched on it in terms of having kind of the female ambassadors that's worked really well for them. So we have, as I said, a number of agents across kind of all our markets. So we've over 918,000 agents. And we've also worked previously with kind of ambassadors that's gone kind of onto the street also to support in terms of that onboarding process. But one of the challenges we kind of do have also with that approach is just kind of the turnover that we have in terms of our ambassadors. And sometimes in terms of the front end agents. So we're having to kind of regularly train these people in order to be able to providing kind of that extra support that customers do need. And then I'd say just like continuing to evolve our customers from our USSD channels to the app channels that are now kind of becoming much more prominent across our customer base, to really be able to take advantage of the user interface that can really kind of take that next step in terms of the types of solutions we can have and the ease of access and intuitiveness in terms of the digital array of services we can provide. So at the moment, it's the kind of that challenge of giving the technical confidence with our customers to move from kind of the interface they know, which we started with when smartphones were very kind of in their infancy, and now we're kind of in an environment where it's moving. We're actually trying to take our customers with us into kind of the app environment, to move them away from a journey they're now so familiar with, but over kind of something that's trying to look similar, but expand kind of the capability set. So they're just a few to touch on, I guess, with the gender angle, although we have kind of many across growing the business.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I'm conscious that we only have 10 more minutes for this event, and we've got lots of questions coming through. Keep asking them and I'll try to get through as many as possible. But there's one interesting one here, which I would let any of our three panelists jump in if they'd like. The question is about whether any of you had any special initiatives that targeted migrant and overseas workers, including when they return home. And perhaps this is something that's also relevant in a pandemic context. Would anyone like to jump in and offer a perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say so. M-Pesa also has one of the key kind of pillars to our commercial strategy is around international remittances. So it's really about trying to partner with other providers in order to try and reduce the cost of international remittances, which have kind of persistently stayed very high, and kind of impacted overseas workers being able to send money back to many of their originating countries. So that's a really important component of our strategy, is to be able to work with particularly kind of send providers in order to support that. Also, between corridors and where regulators allow, we can also provide send services as well in terms of remittances. But in many markets, we're not permitted to do that, but absolutely keen to be able to engage and to support kind of the remittance that's such a huge flow of money worldwide. I'll reach out to other panelists that are working with international remittances as well.
Any other thoughts, Rachel or Sucharita? If not, we can move on to another question.
Yeah, I mean, this for us in South Africa, this is less of a focus, but we are, when we move into our first country in Asia, then we will have to address this issue. So we're already thinking of how best to do this. I mean, I think, you know, I'm looking at this question about what happened with BPI, Global Banco, and M-Bank. And, you know, this has been a journey in terms of the technology, in terms of the funding, in terms of different pieces. So, I mean, I think BPI Global Banco was great and it was really helpful, but it just was maybe a little too early in the Philippines when it got started for that. And it wasn't able to do the customer acquisition and get the comfort level that you need to do that. But I think now, and probably COVID has helped in some ways, but I also think just generally, there is a trend towards more digitalization, and it makes it easier for a number of these institutions to move forward during this period. Just also, we, you know, in terms of challenges, I mean, there are lots of challenges because we all are dealing with startups, and, you know, with startups, you have a lot of people who think it's risky, and you move forward. I mean, we launched, to have a profitable digital bank, you have to lend. We launched our lending product 2 weeks before COVID hit South Africa, and to pull it, waited, you know, a year more to do that. So, you know, there's lots of challenges that I think all three of us have probably faced over the past year, because as you build your business during this time period. But what's super important is to make sure that there is gender disaggregated data from day one. So, and that you have women in the leadership roles, and women in kind of the board, and women funders, because they ask the right questions. And, you know, we collected data, but it took having more women in the leadership of Tyme to actually say, what does that data say? And we got a lot of insights from that. So kind of my big plea is that for ADB and other institutions like that, to keep this in mind with the Women's Finance Exchange, to make sure that people aren't, you know, that many companies are collecting the data, but ask the question, what does that data say and how are you using it? And use your institutional clout and influence to move and push this issue forward.
Very valid points, Rachel. I mean, without the data, you really need the evidence, and ADB does emphasize that quite a lot. But of course, always plenty more work to do. We only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to just ask the three of you sort of one final quick question. I presume that, you know, given the topic and the growth and all your interesting models, you all consider that women is a profitable business segment, but I would like to ask you, in terms of providing specific services for women's and women's businesses, what would you say is your one most important key lesson, and what did you have to do to address that? So up to you, who goes first, whoever is most inspired, but please jump in.
I can go first. So
sure.
You know, overall, what we found was that, especially for women, and given somewhat more limited mobility, especially in India, the tech with touch approach really matters. We launched during the pandemic, again, a program called Kaleido Assist, and which were really Kaleido Assistant points sourced from our own customers. So these were some of our women customers who were actually proficient in using smartphones. They were, you know, maybe 1 in 10 or even 1 in 20 of the smartest, most entrepreneurial customers who saw a business opportunity in working with us, who could see that they could actually encourage other women, because, you know, it's also important to keep in mind that women are likely to be influenced by other women and much more likely to engage more deeply and spend more time with other women rather than men. So that also works better, even from an agenting or an ambassador type of strategy. That was very helpful. So even when nobody was able to reach the customer in the height of the lockdowns, we had our Kaleido Assistant points right inside the community, who were still sort of walking around and could visit, you know, our customers, make sure they were still motivated. For example, if they needed an emergency credit line, some people forget, right, that they're insured. People forget that they have this credit line. So also, you know, make them aware once more. We also supported this with voice-led strategies. We found out that our customers actually don't interact very well with text. They interact much better with voice. So we used voice messages very frequently as a marketing tool to onboard customers, as well as an engagement tool. So these are like, you know, the Indians on this group will remember, you know, like the Vivid Bharti, you know, voice stories, little radio stories that you send in 30-second slots. And these were much, much more powerful. And we had 80% plus listen rates. So, you know, both of these, just listening to, I think, your customer will always lead you to the right answer.
Thank you. So Laura and Rachel, any quick one key lesson you'd like to offer?
I think for us, just very quickly, using personas that women relate to. So a lot of our kind of engagement has been kind of persona led, and where we've done that in an educating kind of approach has been really important for driving adoption. So just all initiatives to build that technical confidence really with women has been kind of really important. And then UX design, so really looking at kind of the simplicity of kind of the design, so it becomes intuitive as well as kind of it spreads virally amongst users to adopt the service. So yeah, there would be a few from my side.
Thank you. Rachel, last words.
I mean, I would say keep looking at the data and keep pushing the issue. You know, you have to be very focused and be kind of very determined to make sure that this issue stays in the forefront of your institution. So don't give up and have faith, because all of you are on the right path.
Thank you. Now, unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions, and it's a shame because the chat is really interesting, but this is the start of something new in the beginning, so start of a conversation. But as time is running out, I will have to hand back now to my colleague, Christine, to close the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samantha. We really appreciate you moderating this interesting discussion. Thank you to Charita, Laura, and Rachel for really interesting insights. And I think we've all benefited and learned a lot today. And I wish that we had more time to talk. I feel like we could talk for at least another hour or so. And there are a lot of really interesting conversations in the chat box as well. I'd like to thank our VP Lavasa and our Director General Suzanne for their opening remarks. And importantly, for all of you out there that have joined us today, we appreciate it. And I also appreciate you celebrating our launch today. And then I'd also like to thank my wonderful team who have made this possible. And that team is just not only in the private sector, but across ADB as well too. As we expand our activities, more webinars and knowledge sharing events will follow. So please visit our website for more information and also for information on the hackathon that we just launched today. And with this, I'd like to close the webinar and hope to see you all soon at another WFX event. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you and keep safe, everyone.